The knock of her suitcase wheels echoed across the marble floors as Lyra Bennett stumbled through the sprawling garden villas of the Miraval coast. Resort dragging herself forward on nothing but caffeine fumes and stubborn pride, her phone had died. Her booking app had crashed, and it was nearly 3:00 a.m. She squinted at the golden numbers on the villa's wooden door, 18A. That had to be ICA. Fumbled with the keycard the concierge had scrawled her name on. In a rush, the lock blinked green. She pushed open the heavy door, sighing in relief at the cool air, and the warm lamplight inside was far fancier than she expected. A vaulted ceiling of weathered beams, a stone fireplace glowing low, and a vase of fresh lilies on the nightstand. That made her florist's heart flutter. They upgraded me, she muttered, dropping her bag for once. Universe, thank you, still. In her hoodie and leggings dusted with flower petals, Lyra barely made it to the edge of the bed before collapsing sideways, arms wrapped around her tote of floral samples like it was a teddy bear. Her last thought before sleep took her was, please don't let me oversleep. A deep masculine voice woke Harry. Wasn't expecting company, especially not one in a sweatshirt that says Floral Warrior. Lyra shot upright. A man stood by the bathroom doorway, towel slung low on his hips, hair damp and eyebrows raised in quiet amusement. He looked like he'd stepped out of a cologne ad, if cologne ads involve startled intruders in petal-stained clothes. She blinked. You're not hotel staff, last I checked, no? He folded his arms, casual and calm. I'd ask who you are, but you seem more surprised than I am. Lyra scrambled off the bed, nearly tripping over her sample tote. Oh my God, I thought this was room 18A, she said desperately, cheeks flushing. He gestured to the door. This is 18A. My 18A, I think the front desk hates me, she groaned, clutching her head. They gave me the key, swiped it, and everything his. Eyes flicked to the bed, to her pile of half-enwrapped floral ribbons and the tangle of wire she used for centerpiece armatures. You're not stealing anything, so I'm not going to call security, though. I'm a little concerned about the state of my bedspread. Lyra glanced at the faint outline of a crushed lilac beneath her knee. I'll pay for cleaning and maybe therapy for the lilacs. They looked traumatized. To her surprise, he smiled. It softened the hard edges of his face. Lilacs are resilient. She narrowed her eyes. You know, flower sim. An architect, I design living space, including gardens, you could say. I respect their mood swings now. It made sense, the clean geometry of the room, the subtle lighting, the way the furniture felt like it had been grown into place rather than arranged. A florist, she blurted, for the Greystone Terrace gala, which I was supposed to work, not crash like a feral sleepwalker. He straightened slightly. The Greystone Gala, giant fundraiser, coastal conservation, everyone who's anyone in the industry. We'll be there. She ran a hand through her tangled hair. And I just slept through my prep time in the wrong villa. Know the event, he said, voice unreadable. No, of course you do, she muttered. Because the universe doesn't just mess with MIT performs elaborate comedy sketches at my expense. He laughed, an actual laugh, deep and really. David, he said, finally offering a hand. David Lennox. She shook at his palm, was warm as handshake. Firm. Lyra Bennett, accidental trespasser, sometimes florist full-time. Disaster. Have met worse disasters, David said, motioning toward the open terrace door. Well? Morning light was spilling through now, painting the walls in gold. Come have coffee with Melia, hesitated. Shouldn't I go explain this to hotel security or something, GED? Rather you explain how you plan to make flowers impressive enough to distract the Greystone board from their terrible wine list. She stared at him. You've tasted it, unfortunately. But coffee first. Something about the way he said it, it low kind, like an invitation instead of an obligation, made her nod. Fine, but only because I'm about 2 breaths away from caffeinato privation violence. He led her to the stone patio where the sea shimmered beyond a grove of coastal pines, to mugs steamed on a wooden table beside a tray of croissants that looked too perfect to have come from the lobby. I baked those, he said, catching her staring. You Rhea, baking architect who rescues floral intruders and knows the terroir of wine. His grin deepened. I like precision, whether it's concrete or croissants. Lyra sipped her coffee and watched him across the table. She still felt out of place, rumpled. Hoodie, windblown hair, and all, but the way he looked at her made her feel like she wasn't unwelcome. So he said, leaning forward, tell me, what's your plan for the gala blooms? Lyra raised an eyebrow. Your genuinely curious sigh of a vested interest. She didn't know what that meant. But the morning sun was warm, the croissant was divine, and his attention was steady, so she began to explain, unaware that the man sitting across from her wasn't just some curious stranger, but the very client who could change her career forever. Lyra had only meant to stay for 1 cup of coffee and maybe half a croissant, but an hour later she was still on the patio. Her fingers wrapped around the warm mug while David Lennox leaned back in his chair, like this was completely normal and maybe. It should have felt normal to people talking over breakfast, nothing fancy except. One of them had woken up in the wrong villa, wearing a hoodie that said Floral Warrior, and the other was a multimillionaire architect, with a mysterious smile and a tendency to bake pastries that rivaled professional patisserie. Tried not to stare at him, but it was hard. David had the kind of presence that filled silence without effort. Calm, grounded, sure of himself in a way that made her both curious and suspicious. "So what's the concept, Lyra?" he asked finally for the terrace. "I assume you're doing something floral with that space." Lyra blinked back into focus. She hadn't realized he was still listening to her ramble about her setup plan O. "Right, yes. It's a twilight theme inspired by coastal dusk muted purples. Dusty roses, faded eucalyptus, and dried sea lavender soft textures under amber lights. I want it to feel like the moment right before the stars come out, when everything is kind of glowing and a little melancholy." David didn't speak for a long time, just nodded slowly, then said, "That sounds like a memory." Lyra tilted her head. "What do you mean?" he shrugged. "It sounds like something you've seen before, not just imagined." Lyra hesitated, then gave a small laugh, that obvious hum. "More honest than obvious," he said. She looked down at the table, biting her lip. "It was my mom's idea. Well, not really an idea. She used to take me to the cliffs behind our neighborhood to watch the sun go down before dinner. She'd point out how the sky turned lavender and told me it looked like a bedtime lullaby." David was quiet again, then said, "That's beautiful." She felt herself flush a little and tried to change the subject. "So what do you do at the gala? Sit at the VIP table? Judge the flower arrangements? Secretly rank the desserts? Something like that?" he said with a cryptic grin. "You said you design buildings, right?" Lyra asked. "I mean, obviously. But what kind? Hotels, museums, mostly homes?" "Lately private resorts, some high-concept community structures." Lyra nodded thoughtfully. "And the gardens, are those your idea too?" "Always. The outdoor space is just as much a room as any inside. A good garden can tell you more about the person living there than their furniture ever willed." "That's something I believe too," she said, surprised. "It's why I love event floristry so much. Even if it only lasts one night, you can say something true with Itchy." Didn't realize how close they were sitting now until the warmth of his voice sent a small chill up her arm. "You ever tell your clients that?" she smirked. "I tell them their centerpieces will make rich people cry." He laughed and shook his head. "I can't tell if you're joking. I never joke about crying guests," Lyra said solemnly. Before David could reply, his phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at the screen, frowned, and silenced it without answering. "You don't have to pretend I'm that interesting," Lyra said, nodding at his phone. "I know. Work emergencies when I see them." David looked at her, and for a moment something unreadable flickered in his eyes. "No, this is more interesting. I can delegate everything except this moment." The way he said it made her chest tighten unexpectedly, and she didn't have a good response. She took another bite of croissant and let herself enjoy the silence that followed. Eventually, David stood stretching slightly and nodding toward the glass doors. "Want to see the terrace?" Lyra blinked. "You mean the one for the Galieshi?" Followed him down the villa path, winding through tall hedges until they reached the edge of a wide, private lawn overlooking the cliffs below. Waves crashed rhythmically against stone. The terrace was breathtaking even. Empty, wide marble tiles met sleek glass railings, with ocean views on all sides. Olive trees grew in large stone pots, and string lights waited overhead like constellations that had yet to light up. Ira stepped onto it, heart-catching. "I didn't realize this would be the space. It's perfect for the design." She began pacing, measuring with her eyes, planning where to anchor the floral arch, where the floating candle pools would go, where the delicate eucalyptus runners would catch the light. David watched her silently, then asked, "What would you change?" She turned back to him, surprised. "Change? If you could redesign it right now, no budget, no deadline, what would you do differently? Lyra took a breath, then pointed that corner. I'd bring in driftwood benches. Instead of the sharp modern chairs, something softer, grounded, organic, and more lavender. They're wild, instead of trimmed. I'd pull the lights lower, so they feel like stars you can almost touch. David nodded like you said. A memory exactly, she said softly. They stood there a moment, wind brushing through her hair, the silence not awkward but full of something unspoken. Then a voice called from the path behind them. Miss Bennett, there you are. Lyra turned to see the event coordinator hurrying toward them. Clipboard clutched to her chest weave. Been looking everywhere. Setup is behind schedule, and we need your input on the dining floral layout immediately. I'm sorry, Lyra said flustered. I got a little lost. She turned to David. Thank you for the coffee and the honesty. Before he could respond, the coordinator added sharply. And please remember, Mr. Lennox prefers to approve all terrace changes before anything is finalized. Lyra froze. Mr. Lennox. David's expression didn't change, not right away. Then he gave a slow nod. Yes, as in David Lennox, the host of the gala, owner of the Greystone estate. Estate architect of this entire venue. Her heart plummeted. You knew. Lyra whispered. You knew the whole time. David stepped forward. Lyra, I didn't want to make it formal. I just liked talking to you. She shook her head, embarrassed, furious, and humiliated. So this was a game to you? Let the clueless florist ramble while you laugh in your multi-million-dollar villa. It wasn't like that, but she was already walking. Away behind her, David stood alone on the terrace as the string lights above him finally flickered on and lit nothing but empty space. Lyra stood in the staff tent, her hands trembling as she packed up spools of wire, scissors, ribbon, and petals that now felt like fragments of something. Broken, the morning's magic had turned to ash, and she was still wearing the same hoodie now, stained with regret and dust. She didn't want to stay. She didn't want to finish the job or face the guests or smell another rose ever again. I lied to me, she told herself again, trying to hold on to the anger because it was easier than the confusion blooming in her chest. And yet she hadn't left yet. Evan, when she could have walked out with no one stopping her. Evan, when every reason to stay had vanished with his name outside the gala was already beginning. Champagne flowed beneath the chandeliers, and music drifted on the coastal air. Then someone cleared their throat behind Hera hotel staffer. In a blazer held out a folded note. For you, he said. Lyra hesitated, then opened it. The handwriting was neat but firm. Come to the terrace. No guests yet. No pressured. Just you. If I've ruined everything, at least let me try to fix one part of it. Lyra stared at the words for a long moment. Then, for reasons she couldn't enmesh, walked. The terrace was empty, but it was no longer the same. The hard chairs were gone, replaced by rough-hewn driftwood benches wrapped in soft linen. The olive trees had been moved to frame the space like a natural arch. Wild lavender and eucalyptus now grew in ceramic basins, spilling like soft waves over the edges. The lights overhead hung lower than before, glowing softly like stars on invisible strings. In the center stood David. He didn't smile. He didn't speak right away. He just looked at her like he wasn't sure if she'd stay. You changed everything, she whispered. Die. Used your sketches, he said quietly. Everything you said this morning, I wrote it down. Lyra stepped closer, breathing in the air thick with rosemary and sea salt. You did this in one day. You inspired it in 1 hour. She wanted to stay angry. She wanted to hold on to the pain, but this wasn't a man mocking her. This was a man standing in the middle of a living apology made with his own hands. Why? Can you tell me who you were? She asked. Because for once I wanted to be someone without the title, without the weight, without being the guy people try to impress. And you walked in with petals in your hair and told me saffron doesn't belong in raspberry mousse. She blinked. You remember that every word. David stepped forward slowly, his voice softer than the music drifting from the ballroom. I've had 1,000 conversations in my career, and none of them felt as real as this morning. You reminded me what passion looks like when it's not polished and public and perfect. You reminded me why I started building things in the first place. Lyra felt something break open inside her, and in the quiet that followed, she said, I'm still Madi deserved that, but I also don't want to walk away from the only terrace that's ever felt like it belongs to me. David extended a hand. Stay, finish it with me. They worked side by side through the final hours before dusk, arranging the centerpieces, rewiring the candle pools, and hand-tying the bouquets to match her original vision. He followed her lead without hesitation. Never correcting, never directing, only helping. When the first guests stepped onto the transformed terrace, gasps rippled through the crowd. Felt like twilight had descended early, like the stars were already there waiting for someone to notice later. During dinner, David stood at the microphone. "I want to thank the brilliant florist behind everything you see tonight." Lyra Bennett turned scarlet as heads turned. David continued, "We gave her too little time, too much pressure, and a layout she hated, so she fixed all of it with grace, honesty, and a little floral magic." The applause that followed was real and loud and made Lyra's eyes sting afterward. Under the lights and the soft hum of music, David found her again. "He meant what I said about a partnership," he told her architect and florist. "We bring spaces to life in different ways. Think we'd make something unforgettable together." Lyra looked up at him, heart steady now. "You want a business deal? I want the beginning of something professional if you want it, but more if you let it be." She considered him there beneath the string lights and the stars they had strung up with their own hands. Then she reached for his hand. "One condition: he picked the first garden." David smiled. "Deal." They danced under the stars as the night unfolded around the man. The terrace, built together, came alive with laughter, light, and the promise of something new.